Housing is a human right. Safe, affordable, accessible, dignified, decent, humane, quality housing is something everyone deserves simply for drawing breath.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Ostrowski, and you're tuning in to Pulp News on KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine. Today I'm joined with HalcyonSelfmade, a volunteer for the organization Streetwatch LA. Streetwatch LA is a grassroots organization that provides mutual aid, camaraderie, and other resources to the unhoused community in LA, as well as advocates against the human rights violations that are perpetuated against them every day by cops, politicians, and NBs. Hal explains that Streetwatch LA promotes the basic humanity of all people, regardless of health, housing status, economic standing, or whatever else may be seen as a detriment to a person's humanity. Additionally, Streetwatch LA promotes the ending of criminalization and destigmatization of the unhoused. Recently, Los Angeles has constructed what is deemed tiny homes in Noho, which were built to act as transitional housing for unhoused folk. Though these tiny homes might sound appealing and helpful at first, these tiny homes perpetuate many deep-rooted social, economic, and classist issues within our systems. To better understand the effects these tiny homes have on unhoused people, I asked Hal how the tiny homes were not addressing the underlying issues of the housing insecurity and crisis within LA.
If by tiny homes you're referring to the 8 by 8 foot sheds in Noho, I'd like to start by saying that these are not homes. I've seen these things before in a myriad of uses, and none of them were for human habitation. I've seen them used in backyards for storage, converted into workshops for woodworking or mechanics, and even as dog kennels for large dogs outside the ASPC in the small West Tennessee town where I spent my high school years. The average jail cell is 6 by 8 feet for 2 people with a toilet. These dog kennels are 2 feet larger than your average jail cell for 2 people with no toilet.
Hal continued to explain that these tiny homes are built from either aluminum or other corrugated metals and are also not insulated. This means that depending on the weather, the tiny homes could be a freezer in the winter or ovens in the summer. Making the homes out of these materials allows the workers of these complexes to hose out the tiny homes after the residents leave. This is not a home, and it's inhumane. We continued on to discuss how these tiny homes disproportionately harm marginalized communities and continue to enforce stigmatization and criminalization of houseless people.
It sends the message that the unhoused, home-free, chronically bankrupt people are somehow at fault for their own circumstances, and as such, are not deserving of a home of their own, and therefore only deserve to live in squalor on the fringes of society. It backs up the rhetoric that we don't deserve good living conditions because we didn't earn it, as if it's not a necessary thing to maintain life, and we don't deserve it for merely being alive. Most unhoused people are unhoused through no fault of their own, but due to trauma, lack of community care, and the gears of capitalism simply grinding them down to keep them from grinding to a halt.
During this conversation, Hal brought up a critical point regarding the criminalization of houseless people. He explained that to add insult to injury, around each new shelter or encampment built, a sex Z is declared around it, meaning it becomes a criminal act to be an unhoused individual within a certain radius of said shelter.
If you stay within that zone, you are subject to harassment from cops, NIMBYs, and sanitation, as well as being ticketed or arrested, merely for existing in proximity to a shelter. While this looks good on the surface, dig a little deeper and you'll find that all of this serves one purpose: to hide the unhoused or to frustrate them so badly that they leave and become anyone else's problem.
From our discussion so far, I felt that it was important to ask Hal what's something that he felt that everyone should know about regarding the housing crisis for houseless folk in LA.
Unhoused people are not your enemy. We are people just trying to survive in any way we can without access to doors that lock, toilets, showers, and about 1 billion other things that housed people take for granted. And all most of us want is to be left alone to survive in any way we know how. Most of us don't even ask for active help. We ask only to not be actively harmed because of your misguided fear and the aesthetics of being confronted with the consequences of greed and capitalism.
With the tiny homes costing upward of $3.2 million, we discussed where or how this money could have been better spent to make a greater impact for houseless folk.
The only way to solve the housing crisis is to provide homes as a matter of human rights. $3.2 million could have been better spent forcing landlords to take housing choice vouchers, issuing more vouchers, and permanently housing an untold number of people. But that just makes too much sense. Aside from that, 3.2 million could have fed, clothed, and temporarily housed an untold number of formerly unhoused people in commandeered hotel rooms at any time during this pandemic.
Hal explained that during this pandemic, Garcetti or Newsom could have declared a state of emergency and forced hoteliers to house people. Instead, they let the brands maintain their blatant disregard for human life while still hovering around a 90% vacancy rate. Hal continued to tell me that there are enough vacant homes in LA County, either apartments or houses, that could house each and every unhoused individual in the county, but they'll stay empty unless mandated by the government, which will never happen because they just simply don't care. After discussing the many problems that are perpetuated with the tiny homes, I concluded our discussion by asking Hal how he felt that other cities are trying to follow the lead of these tiny homes and recreate their own.
This is not the answer. This is a band-aid when it needs stitches. The only thing this does is allow politicians to pat themselves on the back because they did something. But all they did was further dehumanize and vilify those they consider beneath them.
Thank you once again to Hal for the interview today. If you would like to learn more about the issues unhoused folk face, you can find more in Hal's article, Who Anti-Unhoused Legislation Harms?, written for Knock LA for more education.
I will not stop. I will not be happy. I will not be content until it is better for everyone. Solve my individual problems. You're only going to give me more fuel for the fire until it's right for everyone. Nothing about us without us. Housing is a human right.